Okay, so let's talk about How to Survive a Plague. I'm sort of mixed feelings on this one. I think it was a really well-made film. I thought it told the story really well. I didn't like a lot of the people that I was watching. But what I found interesting about it was this is almost like a primer for how to protest in this age. It's like I look at there's two big protest groups out there right now: the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street. One of them has been really successful in getting people elected and getting things happening. One of them has not been very successful and is just sort of, we'll just let people know that a thing exists. And this film, I think, shows you how important a real leader is for a protest movement is. There's a guy in this film named Peter Staley who he could run for office tomorrow, and I think he'd get a lot of votes because you see some of these speeches he gives and some of this leadership he shows, and it's amazing how good he is at this. I thought the drama of the internal politics of the group was not that terribly interesting. I guess I should say what this is about because I haven't said yet. This is about a group called ACT UP that was formed in the late 80s or maybe early 80s when AIDS was becoming an issue. And they were there to push for more research about the AIDS crisis, about how do we solve this? How do we get more treatment? Because people are dying left and right, and it's affecting us. I will say up front, I've never cared about anything as much as these people care about their issue, and I totally respect that. But I think the film is a really interesting look at when you're faced with your own mortality, the lengths you will go to try to save it. Because they talk about a lot in the film about getting drugs passed. They were really unhappy. One of their big protest issues was, the FDA is not working quickly enough to get these drugs through the system. Mm-hmm. So they pushed and pushed and pushed and finally got this drug through the system. And then 5 years later, they find out it doesn't do anything. Like it doesn't work at all. And it's like, okay, so this is a good lesson, guys. This is why we have these systems in place. And I understand why they're so frustrated. And there was that stigma. There still is a stigma with AIDS and HIV. So I understand why they had to push so hard. But at the same time, I kind of feel like, well, there's some lessons here,
Yeah, what I really I think out of all of them, honestly, this is my favorite movie, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Is because one, it's a historical document.
Yes,
I was very fascinated on how it painted a picture of this time frame because I was a kid when this stuff was going down, and I just vaguely remember it as sort of something that a lot of people were talking about. Mm-hmm. So I really wasn't sort of living it in the forefront of my life.
Yeah. One thing we should say about the film is it's very much filmed from the time when it was all happening. Right. There's a few like talking heads of like, here's what we were thinking at that time, but a lot of it is home movies of people filming the stuff.
Either home movies or news footage sort of with, a little bit of voiceover, narration, people telling their sort of side of the story. So, on that, of course, if it's historical, it has to educate you, and that's exactly what it did.
Yeah.
It educates you, gives you a really strong idea of, honestly, I wouldn't say just one perspective. I would say it gives you a really good idea of both sides of the story.
Exactly.
And I thought that was something that was missing from Invisible War, was that honestly it wasn't really portraying sort of the other side of the story very well. Not saying that like everybody was innocent in that on that side, but if you're going to be a little bit balanced, I think that's the way to do it. And it in a sense, I would agree with you that none of the characters, or not too many of the characters, are likable, but you're still somewhat sympathetic.
I'm very sympathetic to almost every single one of them.
So I enjoyed that part of it.
I do think that a lot of them were sort of misguided about what they thought would work and didn't work. But however, the one guy that I found most distasteful was the guy who got into an argument on stage with Bill Clinton. Mm-hmm. I don't remember his name, but it worked.
Yeah.
Like he started talking about it and he forced people to start talking about it in that presidential campaign. So even though Bill Clinton totally owned him in that moment, but I totally respect what he felt like he had to do. But at the same time, I found it distasteful what he did.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think the movie does really well is that it sort of has this sort of ticking time bomb aspect to it. Mm-hmm. Although you kind of know how it ends. Like if you've just been paying attention for your whole life.
Yeah.
But I really like that because there's this really sense of urgency despite because you start second guessing yourself. You're like, did something happen that I wasn't paying attention to? Like what's coming next? What's coming next? And then it just sort of gets there. And then you have your conclusion and you're like, okay, like I'm totally cool with this.
And they also did a good job. You know, it's talking, you're seeing people who were figures at that time, and they're basically talking about, I maybe have 6 months, I maybe have 1 year. They keep it a secret till the very end, which people actually are still around. And, you know, then they show you at that point who these people are that made it. And that I thought was a really excellent choice.
Yeah, it sort of starts sort of in the past and really pulls you forward without giving too much away.
Yeah.
Which I really appreciated in terms of sort of how it was built.
Yeah. I also really liked that they talked to the scientists. I think that could be like its own documentary, just the scientists talking about their search for some kind of cure for AIDS and what it ended up being. That was the most interesting part to me, I think. So, but I like that one. A Place for Film is recorded at WFIU Studios in Bloomington, Indiana.